I had dinner with a bunch of these kids. Um, Anna was the one who arranged it with
Hmm.
the librarian, this dinner, and it was me and it was the New York Times reporter, me and a bunch of students. And I have to tell you, these kids have found a voice in this fight. They're making YouTube videos of them doing sit-ins. They're walking out of, they're becoming activists. Yeah, the thing that bums me out the most is I remember reading Junot Diaz's novel Drown, and it was the first time I ever read a book. It's a short story collection, but it was the first time I ever read a book and thought to myself, "Wow, maybe these little stories that I write could have a place in the world too."
Yeah.
And I just think of these kids that I met in Tucson and all this great literature that they were being exposed to that now has been boxed up and taken away from them. And I think it goes beyond the novels. It's about the kids and what that means that they actually waited until class was in session to go in and box up these books that they took an ownership of.
What was your reaction? What were the students' reactions when you got there? How
You
did
know,
they receive you?
well, okay, well, first of all, I think my book was actually one of the novels that was used in this document, and I
Hmm.
think it was labeled as anti-American or quote unquote overthrow government.
Actually, promoting racial resentment.
Yes, how's that? And the bummer is, Mexican White Boy is about growing up biracial and
Hmm.
trying to make sense of your identity.
Hmm.
So, in no way am I trying to promote any whatever you just said.
Promoting racial resentment, and I
Yeah,
have a huge problem with that because it seems as though most of the students who you would probably be addressing in Tucson would be of either Mexican, white, biracial descent. So they could conceivably benefit from your books.
Of course
Yes?
they would.
absolutely. I think
I'm being
of all the
sarcastic,
kids I
of
met,
course.
are you guys still there?
Yeah, I'm saying I'm being sarcastic
Okay.
because it's so obvious that the students need this.
Yeah, I mean, of the students I met, I would say 85% of them were Mexican American. Um, at least some. And a lot of them are biracial because you know what? Tucson obviously is a border town and you have mixed racial mixing, right? And I think the world is changing that way. And I'm hoping that literature catches up and shows mixed kids. And I gotta say, I was so welcomed by these kids. And what I loved is that this book that I wrote, that is really like generated, the genesis of it is me feeling like I wasn't Mexican enough growing up. And I sort of wanted to explore that in a novel. And then to have these Mexican Americans kids really embrace me, for me it was like an honor. It was like this is all I've ever wanted was to like be embraced by this side of my culture. And you know, what a slap in the face, right? That you can't read about yourself. Like that's an amazing gesture. It's awful.
Talk about that. What does it mean to not be Mexican enough?
I think when you grow up biracial, there's this idea that you don't fit in on either side.
Hmm.
Like there's a line in Mexican White Boy where the narrator describes the main character Danny as he was a Mexican among the white boys and a white boy among the Mexicans. That idea of not fully fitting in on either side. And so I love as a writer to watch characters navigate that terrain, trying to figure out, well, who am I and do I feel like I'm less than in these certain situations? For me, I didn't know many people on my mom's side because she had a very, very small family and she wasn't raised by her actual mom or dad. But on my dad's side, that's where all our family was, and it was the color of our family. And I always felt like I was the least Mexican in our family. And the truth is, I was the first to go to college, and that also made me feel a little distant from the family. And so, a lot of, when I work with the biracial element, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to figure it out myself. And I think a lot of kid readers are seeing that and identifying. And it's weird when I go to schools and say, who in here is biracial? they sort of like raise their hand hesitantly and like look around to make sure that, they're not the only one, but in reality, it's half of them,
Sure. And they probably can't put a stamp on what that means.
Yeah, they haven't thought about it specifically or directly, and here's literature that kind of confronts it. And I love when kids write me and say, I'm a Mexican white girl, or I'm a Native American white girl. Like I love when they use that, they play with the title and tell me who they are.
Yeah, I think just reading your story, it gave me a sense of that there are people who are the antagonists, and then there are people who have to deal with those antagonists in the world. And it didn't matter that you were trying to play basketball or baseball, whatever the scene is. People of both genders can identify. And that's the brilliance of it. So for it to not be a part of curriculum when we're trying to get literature of diverse multitudes into the books, the hands of students, is to me a travesty.
Yeah, it's a slap in the face. I gotta say, I'm gonna steal a line from Junot Diaz. I heard him speak at an English conference 3 years ago, and I guess apparently he's a big fan of comic books, and he said, growing up when I would read comic books, many times the monster of the story couldn't see a reflection of themselves in a mirror. And he said, the quickest way to create monsters in inner cities is to never show these kids a reflection of themselves in literature. And I love that idea.
Say that again, because that's important.
Yeah. He just said, if monsters can't see themselves in comic books like they can't see themselves in mirrors, they can't see a reflection of themselves. He said, the quickest way to create monsters in our inner cities is to never show these kids a reflection of themselves in literature. And I think that's such a great idea.
That is so poignant. We had another author who raised the point. We were talking about the Trayvon Martin situation, and she said the best way to, eradicate people from even understanding themselves is by taking the books out.
It's so true.
Of the schools. That's how you can ensure that they won't learn about themselves.
It's so validating to identify with the character, and I think so many kids of color used to have to find other things to identify with the white protagonist, like the way they felt. That feeling is universal, and they can, these kids are going to identify with that. I identified with that, the way kids felt, the sadness, the feeling alone. But it just feels so much, the feeling is so much stronger when you also identify with the cultural stuff, the tortillas coming off the griddle and what it means based on where you get the tortilla in the family gathering, because it kind of like suggests your family rank. It's insider information that is so important for a kid connecting to a book. If you're going to tell a kid that this insider information that you're identifying with is not valid and we're taking it out of the curriculum, what are you really saying?
You're taking a part of the history, their history, away from them. And I think that's where we don't do enough of investigating in schools to find out what's your background. What is it about the tortilla that we don't know other than what's on the commercials? So when you went into this school and you saw the students, what was the reaction? I mean, how did they, I'm taking myself back to an earlier question. I'd had this vision of you being in the library and there are these students of all backgrounds within the Mexican white families, and how did they react to you?
Well, I love it because I go in there and my big thing is, look, I am not some genius who the book or my prose comes from the heavens. I'm like a working class writer who was a mediocre student, but I found a calling in art. And I look at them and I say, look, I was a reluctant reader. I didn't read until I was really in college. That's when I found books. And I tell them, like, hey, if I can be up here and I have a couple books out, you definitely can too. It's that idea that you see someone who isn't some genius or some kid who went to an Ivy League college. He's just regular like me. And I think that's what most of the students respond to with me, is kind of the story. I come from where they come from.
That's right. And yet it's illegal.
Yes.
To have your book in the schools.
And it's, what's interesting is I've been getting quite a bit of sort of semi-hate mail, from the Times article. And basically it's people saying, hey, look, your book is not banned. You can read it in the library, which is true. But the thing is, people are creative now. This is all based on fear, but they know banning a book is going to get huge negative press.
Sure.
So they find other ways to do it, right? It's a little bit more savvy now. And, let's box these books up. Let's never use the word ban. Let's take down this program, because really it's fear, isn't it? It's Mexican-American population in Tucson is growing and growing, and people are scared. They're especially scared if the teachers are telling them to really think about the laws that are in place, think about the history they're being taught. People are scared of that.
But it's amazing that that the students would not. I'll rephrase that. I think for the students to be empowered should be a positive thing. Wouldn't you think?
Exactly. Wouldn't you think? Yeah.
But yet it's illegal. I don't understand.
I was telling somebody recently, what they've succeeded in doing is creating a generation of activists. Because I had dinner with a bunch of these kids. Anna was the one who arranged it with the librarian, this dinner, and it was me and it was the New York Times reporter, me and a bunch of students. And I have to tell you, these kids have found a voice in this fight. They're making YouTube videos of them doing sit-ins. They're walking out of, they're becoming activists. And in a weird way, this thing that's been taken away from them is showing them what they have to do to make change in the world. It's making them want it even more.
Which is probably not expected from those who put this into effect, I would think.
Exactly.